Equalization, the power of frequency control.
Alright, the next area of the console we're going to talk about is the EQ section. Now this is probably the most used area of the console, but also the most misunderstood. This area is going to require you to do a lot of practice to fully comprehend, due to the fact that your ear needs to get trained to the frequencies you're adjusting. Now we're going to cover high shelf EQ, low shelf EQ, mid EQ, and mid parametric or mid sweepable, which is the same thing. Now what we've done is we've put a graphic on the screen for you to look at. All audio sources come into the console as a flat line, and what you do with the EQ determines the shape of this line. On the left-hand side of the screen is 20 Hertz. Now this is so low, you probably won't hear the frequency, but you'll just feel it in your body. On the right-hand side is 20,000 Hertz. Now this is so high, only a person with a good ear could pick out this frequency. Let me show you how this works on the board. First of all, let's raise the master fader to 0 or unity, and the channel we're working on to the same position. Let's start with the high shelf EQ. As I add 10 dB to the high shelf, you can see the line on the right hand side of the screen start to rise. My voice sounds very bright now. Returning this pot back to the center position flattens the line and my voice is normal. Let's cut 10 dB on the high shelf. Now the line starts to drop on the right hand side of the screen and my voice becomes very dull. Returning it back to the center position flattens the line and everything is back to normal.
High shelving filter then would give you a boost or a cut above, and it's typically 8, 10, sometimes as high as 12 kilohertz. It's to take the sibilance out, take out some background noise stuff, or add some sibilance. I mean, if you boost, you can add a little bit of sibilance to things as well. Strings, instruments where there's lots of that in there. One mistake is not to go boosting 8, 10, or 12 kilohertz on a program that doesn't even have information in that band. All you're doing is adding noise.
Let's go take a look at this on the low shelf EQ. As I begin to add 10 dB to the low shelf, you can see the line begin to rise on the left-hand side of the screen, and now my voice is very thick. Returning this pot to the center position flattens the line, and my voice is normal. Let's cut 10 dB. As I begin to do this, the line drops on the left-hand side of the screen, and my voice is very thin now. Returning this pot back to the center position flattens the line, and everything is back to normal. Now let's say your console has a fixed mid EQ. It's actually very similar to a high shelf or a low shelf EQ in its operation, except it has a fixed point in the middle of this line somewhere between 800 and 1000 Hertz from where it starts EQing from. Now how this works, by adding 10 dB to the fixed mid EQ causes a hump to form in the center of this line with 1K right in the center. You can hear that this is definitely an invitation for feedback. Returning this pot back to the center position flattens the line and my voice is normal. By cutting 10 dB on the fixed mid, a dip starts to form in the center of this line. You can hear that my voice has very little presence to it. By returning this pot back to the center position flattens the line and my voice is back to normal. Now this is where a parametric or a mid-sweepable EQ has an extreme advantage over a fixed EQ. Parametric or sweepable EQs use two rotary pots to perform their function. One is a frequency selector knob and the other is a volume control knob for that frequency you selected. Let's select 2K. Now by adding 10 dB to 2K you can see that a hump starts to form in the line with 2K directly in the center. My voice is very harsh. By returning this knob back to the center position, the line goes flat and my voice is back to normal. Let's cut 10 dB. As I begin to do this, you can see that a dip starts to form in this line with 2K directly in the center. My voice begins to sound very unclear. Returning this pot back to the center position flattens the line and my voice is normal. Let's go do this at 400 Hz. By rotating the frequency selector pot around, I find 400 Hz. By adding 10 dB to 400, a hump starts to form in this line with 400 directly in the center. Now my voice sounds rather muddy. By rotating this pot back to the center position, The line goes flat and my voice is back to normal. Let's cut 10 dB. As I begin to do this, a dip forms in this line with 400 now in the center, and my voice sounds rather hollow. By rotating this pot back to the center position, flattens the line, and my voice is back to normal.
Having a sweepable EQ has tremendous advantages if you're trying to pinpoint a particular offending frequency. With a sweepable EQ, if you use your ears instead of your fingers, you can pinpoint where that frequency has to be adjusted and just make some slight adjustments. They're especially handy in the mid and low mid areas where you get a lot of different resonances coming from various people that sing.
Now you can see the basic function of a mid-sweepable or a parametric EQ. You can see how flexible it is with frequency select and how you can cut and boost these frequencies. Now in some consoles there's also a low cut or sometimes called the high pass filter built into each channel. Now what this does is it substantially reduces the amount of low end in that channel, starting somewhere between 75 and 80 Hertz. As you can see, learning the EQ section of your console might take quite a bit of time to perfect. But what I find works the best is take a microphone, plug it into one of the inputs of your console, and just experiment with shaping your own voice. That's exactly how I learned.
A quick way to find frequency and tone is to put on your headphones, turn the house gain down so you don't get feedback because you're boosting now those frequencies like 15 dB. Turn up the gain on the actual parametric EQ structure full, which is plus 15. And then you sweep through with the frequency selection button and actually find the frequency that you want to boost or cut. It's fine if you find the one that you want to cut because you can hear it clearly because of the gain being all the way to the maximum. So if you have a thuddy guitar, you can find that frequency by sweeping through, and then when you find it, just dip that gain structure and actually cut the frequency that you're hearing, and that should help clean up your problems. The problem is if you try and do that with the whole system running, you'll probably get some feedback because that frequency is being boosted so high, and as you're rotating through the whole frequency spectrum.
In reviewing this section, remember, keep a picture of this graph in your mind while you're learning the art of equalization. The high shelf EQ adjusts the high frequencies, starting usually between 10 and 12 K. Rotating the pot cuts or boosts these frequencies. The low shelf EQ cuts or boosts the frequencies in the low end, starting around 80 Hz. And the fixed mid EQ adjusts the mid frequencies, starting around 800 Hz to 1 kHz. The parametric or sweepable EQ uses two rotary pots to perform its function. One of these pots allows you to select any of the frequencies throughout the entire mid-range spectrum, and the other pot cuts or boosts that selected frequency. The high-pass filter substantially reduces the amount of low end on the selected channel, usually at around 75 to 80 Hz. This is a very effective feature for cleaning up vocal channels where the low end is not needed.
I got a job in a movie theater. This was actually in the 70s, so this is a ways into my life. And we had the movie Star Wars come and play, so this would be in the late 70s. And I hooked up every speaker I could find in the movie house. There was about 14 of them. I figured I had it right with the series parallel diagrams out of the library book I had borrowed. And it was a phase linear amp with a Cytronic mixing board. Well, we got through the opening titles and everything popped out. So it was an expensive lesson. We had to go back to the little house system that they had to get the show to complete. But we ran 32 shows, so I got to see a lot of Star Wars.